We have Lieutenant Colonel Alan West on with us. Now, he is the guy who delivered Texas and fought real hard. The things that are going here in Texas, going on with the Democratic Party, shady games, millions and millions and millions of dollars coming into the state to flip it blue. He kept it red. Welcome, Alan West. How are you?
Hey, it's good to be with you, Glenn, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So you said something this weekend, if I may quote, Supreme Court in tossing Texas lawsuit that was joined by 17 states, 106 U.S. congressmen, has decreed the state can take an unconstitutional action and violate its own election law, resulting in damaging effects on the other states that abide by the law, while the guilty state suffers no consequence. This decision establishes as a precedent that says states can violate the U.S. Constitution and not be held accountable. This decision will have far-reaching ramifications for the future of our constitutional republic. Perhaps law-abiding states should bond together and form a union of states that will abide by the Constitution. I'm for that. I'd like to know what you mean by that.
Well, it's very simple, Glenn, and I know that there are some people that have shown their ignorance and incompetence saying that I'm calling for secession, when actually the people that are violating and not following the Constitution are the seditionists and those that are advocating secession. The bottom line is that how will states be able to protect themselves if, by our Constitution, if states have a grievance, and they do have a First Amendment right to petition their government for redress or grievance, if they have a grievance against another state, the original jurisdiction of that by the Constitution goes to the Supreme Court. But yet the Supreme Court just said in their decision last week, Friday, that they're not going to hear it. They tossed it out. So how do we make sure that states who are following the law and they are, receiving damages because of states that did illegal activities, unconstitutional actions, violating their own election law, by having courts, by having secretaries of state, by having governors change election law, where do they go to redress their grievances? And so I think it is very important, very imperative that we do start looking at how these states, if we're going to have a more perfect union, which is what the preamble of the Constitution said, and abide by the Constitution, they have to look at how they can bind together and have a strong voice if the Supreme Court is going to continue to take this stance of not protecting law-abiding states, which under the 14th Amendment, there is an equal protection under the law clause.
So let's stick with the Supreme Court decision first, and then we'll get to the rest of this. The Supreme Court did reject hearing it. I think that was a massive mistake, especially when half the country feels like nobody's listening to us. Nobody's even listening to us. They should have listened. Whether that changed the outcome or not, it should have been ruled on. However, the one thing that was ruled on was the case itself. They threw it out, and even Scalia, Barrett, and not Scalia, but God, why do I keep screwing him up with Alito and Thomas agreed with not hearing it. What does that tell you, if anything?
Well, it tells me that I am very concerned that the Article 3 of the Constitution says that courts are supposed to interpret law. Now, if all of a sudden we have justices that decide, that they're not going to interpret the law, they have actually abdicated one of their enumerated duties and responsibilities. So they should have at least heard the case, should have allowed the evidence to come forward and make a decision on it, and not just simply say, we're not going to accept the case. And so therefore it comes back to my statement. What protection do law-abiding states have against states that are going out there and violating the Constitution and violating law? You cannot have states that all of a sudden decide, well, we're going to have this universal mail-in ballot thing. You don't have to have signature verifications. We'll accept these ballots anytime after the November the 3rd election. And look at what has happened in New York. Claudia Tenney is supposedly up by 12 ballots, and then guess what happens? Oh, we found 12 ballots. Mm-hmm. So if you want to talk about disenfranchising legal voters, it's these unconstitutional acts that are doing it. But like you just said, where do people go? Where do states go to have their voices heard? The right to petition their government for redress of grievances. That is the foundation of our Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson wrote.
So what do I would imagine the AGs would need to get together and do this together to make sure that they are blocking unconstitutional rulings, et cetera, et cetera. What does that mean to you in your eyes? How do they do that?
Well, I mean, I am not a lawyer by trade. I'm just a simple, stupid paratrooper that took an oath to the Constitution back in 1982. And I just see this as a threat. I see this as a fracture to our constitutional republic. So it's not just the state attorney generals. It's also the state legislators. If you are a state legislator in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin, you need to rise up. You need to stand up and say that we cannot allow the judicial branch in our state or the executive branch in our state to supersede and to usurp our duties and our responsibilities. They cannot change law. We're the ones that have been duly elected by the people to do such. So I think another thing that needs to happen, these state legislatures need to bond together. And I would hope that the state legislatures in these respective four states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, will take an action and take a stand today.
Do you see that happening? Have you heard any rumblings of that?
I have not, and it just goes back to me asking the question is the courage that it took back in 1776 for those 56 men to stand up and establish these United States of America. I am really concerned that we still have that courage in this country.
I have often thought of the only words that were spoken by George Washington during the actual Constitutional Convention. Of course, New York was looking for special exceptions and handouts, as usual. And Ben Franklin had fought against it, and they were starting to enter into really horse trading, and it was getting ugly, and the whole room stopped, and Ben Franklin looked at George Washington, and he stood up, and the only thing he really said during the convention were these words: "Let us raise a banner that the wise and the honest can repair. The rest is in the hands of God." And what he meant by that was do the right thing. We haven't come this far to screw it up. Just do the right thing, and it will be repairable in the future because they'll see that we tried to do the right thing, and they'll want to do the right thing. But also, when you do the right thing, God's going to do what God's going to do, and just accept the consequences one way or another.
No, you're absolutely right. And, a lot of people took some consternation with that final sentence in my statement. But if you go to the preamble of our Constitution, what does it say? It says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." What's the very first thing? Establish justice. So what our founding fathers knew was that in order to have a more perfect union, we had to have a constitution. We had to have a rule of law. If we have gotten to the point where we don't believe in that rule of law, we're not going to have a more perfect union. And that's why I talked about a union, the words that they use, of law-abiding states that abide by the Constitution. That's how we have a perfect union. And you're right. Leaders, what I learned in the military, leaders know what right looks like. And leaders don't pick and choose when to do what is right, which comes back to what the Supreme Court did last Friday. You do what is right all the time. You interpret the law. That is your responsibility by the Constitution. And now states have to be concerned, where do we go to redress our grievances if the highest court in the land, which by original jurisdiction, that's the only court we could go to, decided to not listen to us?
So, Alan, let me ask you a difficult question. Say all of these things fail, and on the 20th of January, or whatever it is, Joe Biden is sworn in, and that's just the ruling of the courts and the system and the legislatures and all of that. What is it going to take to get people to come back into the fold and not split apart?
Well, I think when you just said the ruling of the courts, first and foremost, the courts need to hear the people. And if the courts refuse to hear the people, then you're going to have an issue come January the 20th. And we cannot live in a country where every single time there is a Republican that is elected, George W. Bush, he's illegitimate. When Donald Trump is elected, he's illegitimate. Let's resist him. When Amy Coney Barrett is brought onto the Supreme Court by constitutional process, she's illegitimate. Brett Kavanaugh is illegitimate. We cannot have progressive socialists that believe that they can rule by absolutism and totalitarianism, and everything that doesn't agree with them is illegitimate. So I think that first and foremost, the American people need to go by the electoral process, the ballot process. But if you start to have mandates, edicts, orders, and decrees that are handed down, such as red flag laws, such as mandatory gun buybacks, these things, I believe that the American people have a right to say no.